Welcome back to an episode of Life in the Stands podcast. We have Jake and Zach on the podcast today. And as you guys can tell by Bender's face and like the negative aura that's surrounding this episode already, the Celtics won game three of the NBA Finals. And, if history is telling in any way, they're probably going to be NBA champions this year. So we're going to talk a lot about what that means for the offseason, how the series has gone. We're going to, really dive into all aspects of that. But first, I want to thank everyone for watching and listening on whatever platform you are watching and listening on. Remember to like and subscribe. Go follow us and interact with us on Twitter. That's where we're most active. And Bender, let's have you just kind of share your overall thoughts. Celtics win game three, game four tonight, Friday night in Dallas still. There's so many things to talk about. Luka fouls out, Kyrie shot at the end, all of the above, the whistle, Bender. Yeah, let's
Uh,
hear it.
yeah, I think you were on the right track the way you started that. Luka fouling out. That's where I want to start first, just because I feel like the refs have been absolutely ridiculous this whole series so far. Not saying that would make a huge difference, but I think tonight it showed. On a play like that, I don't think when you go to the monitor to review that foul, you don't call the sixth foul on a superstar because I feel like you're just swaying the game in the direction of the Celtics to win. So I don't like how they handled that. I think you keep Luka in the game, and make it eventful, which technically you're not supposed to as a ref. I get it, whatever. But there is influence on those types of calls. If you look at history, um, that shows that they shouldn't have called that on Luka. However, I think the Mavs just flat out don't have enough. But I also don't even think you could say a team like the Timberwolves or the returning champions, the Nuggets, like have enough against the Celtics team, which is why I'm more on the upset side of things because I know the Celtics team, the main core is locked in for next year too, at the least. Um, and there will be off-season moves to be made, especially with that bench that's a little bit on the weaker side. Some would say, we would say, maybe not Kyle. Kyle's a big Peyton Pritchard fan. We'll get to that one day. Um, but just knowing that they're locked in for a while is kind of a tough scene at this point.
Yeah, there's really not a scenario in the next couple of years, say 2 to 3, where that core gets broken up, like you said. There'll be moves around the edges and all those kinds of things, but this Celtics team is here to stay. And obviously, we're not Celtics fans, so I think a lot of people were probably rooting against Boston in this series. I think they were the heavy favorite, but I think people, wanted to see the Mavs win. If you ask kind of like the general consensus, but that being said, you got to give them their flowers a little bit too. I mean, it's a fantastic roster. They all pitched in when they needed to. They finished the job this time around. Obviously, we're recording right. I mean, it's Friday morning. We don't know for sure they win game four, but even if they lose game four again, chances are, very likely the Celtics win this series and become NBA champions. You gotta give them their flowers a little bit too. But going all the way back to some of those calls, even in game three, after Luka gets taken out, then they go back up the floor. Kyrie's hot. He's hitting shots, and the refs take him out of his rhythm entirely by calling a really bad illegal screen on PJ Washington in the front court. Not even past half court yet, on a Drew Holiday flop. So little things like that, it does really sway the game. It sways the game a lot, changes the momentum. Kyrie comes back down, and the next shot he takes is that fader three that pretty much ends the game when he misses.
Yeah. The illegal screen was kind of crazy, although I don't agree with being down four and taking that fadeaway three-pointer from Kyrie. Um, I said it before we hopped on here. He took his Cleveland Cavaliers dagger shot and missed, which would have been cool, obviously, if he makes it. But you have Al Horford on you. Please take him to the hoop.
Yeah, go make a
He's
play.
38 years old. He's 38. Just go right by him, please, and thank you. Um, the other part of this is like, yes, I'm a Celtics hater because I'm a Sixers fan. I'm also, in general, just a Celtics hater this postseason, um, just because of the kind of run they had to make. Obviously, you play who you play, so it's not exactly their fault. But at the same time, you can't tell me if a healthy Bucks team couldn't hop in there and beat them. A healthy Knicks team couldn't at least challenge them. Um, so there are kind of like some statements in there that would be like they have a returning team. Maybe they make it back next year. A lot of people think they will just because that core's together, but there are teams with the ability to push them um, in the East, but they are the powerhouse, which is kind of upsetting, like I said, with that core being together. I just don't like the way they made their run. I don't like Jason Tatum and how inefficient he's been, and still gonna win because of how good the roster is.
Right.
Um, game one was Jaylen Brown with a little bit of Drew Holiday. Game two was Drew Holiday, and this game three was Jason Tatum. So he finally had a good game, but the supporting cast is the reason he's not being talked about enough. So I think that needs to be a whole other conversation. I think Jaylen Brown's the best player on that team. Jason Tatum is the guy the media want to be the number one player on that team. Whole different conversation. I'm to the point where this roster was so well rounded and built with that starting lineup, first six guys, because Al Horford would come off the bench if Kristaps is healthy. Um, I'm willing to give the MVP, the Finals MVP, to Brad Stevens at this point, and building that roster. That's where I'm at with the Celtics.
Yeah, and I mean it is super top heavy, I would say, but when you're only playing 6 or 7 guys deep, what does it matter as long as those guys are decently healthy? So yeah, again, I mean, like I said, you got to give them props, but I also think that you didn't even mention the Heat when you're talking about powerhouse teams in the East, right? And who knows what happens in this offseason, so we can get into that conversation a little bit too. Celtics are probably going to win this finals, right? But it's still up in the air what some of these contenders in the East look like going into next season. It seems like the Bucks will probably run it back with Giannis, Damon, Doc Rivers. The
Yeah.
Sixers will most definitely look different. They'll have a third star. No one knows who that'll be, but they're going to bring in someone who's a decently big name. Who knows if Jimmy stays with Miami or what happens with the Heat roster this season, this
I say
offseason. So,
the Miami Heat are the Celtics' kryptonite, especially with Jimmy healthy and that
right,
whole team healthy. So I think if he plays in that series, you're at least in a 6 game series, whether it's the Heat win or the Celtics win, it doesn't matter. At least they had some kind of competitiveness to that series. And I feel like the underdog team we're not talking about, and it's kind of disgusting to talk about, is the New York Knicks. Because they're going to look to give OG his bag and they're going to look to re sign Randall. And if they don't re sign Randall, they're making a really, really big move to pair Brunson with somebody else. But
right.
they're going to be able to keep guys like Hart and DiVincenzo and stuff. So, like, they will have a competitive team for the Celtics.
The crazy thing about the Knicks too is that core isn't going anywhere because of their history together.
Yeah,
Like even if they have to
no.
take a lesser bag, Hart is staying, DiVincenzo is staying, Brunson is staying. They're 2 hours away from Philly, away from Nova. I think Mikal Bridges is a candidate to end up there, but
When your only hole to fill for the off season is if you're going to re-sign Hartenstein or not, that's the question you're asking yourself. I think you're in a very good spot if you're the New York Knicks. If that's the only question you really have for that team, because I don't see a world where OG goes somewhere else, and I don't see a world where Julius Randle goes somewhere else. You're talking about your probably backup center with Mitchell Robinson getting back in the starting lineup. So you're not talking about anything at this point. You're looking at a very slight move, maybe for your bench, like a Jordan Clarkson type, maybe. So they're in a really good spot.
yeah. So, all that to be said, the Celtics are going to walk away from the season NBA champions, but and even though they're going to have that core locked in for a long time, it'll be interesting to see what happens along the edges. And a lot of those Eastern Conference teams could be contenders going into next season. We haven't mentioned the Sixers at all at this point. I feel like we're both afraid to mention them because it's first or second round exits, and Embiid's going to be hurt. But hey, I mean, maybe the Sixers do something crazy and trade Embiid this offseason or completely switch it up. So who knows? The East will be different next year, though.
For sure. I'm hoping for a different result, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely hoping for a different result, um, but I think one more thing I'll kind of mention here. I think Joe Mazzulla deserves a lot of credit at this point too, because the actions that they run, the movement and the spacing. I mean, I know you could just simply say, hey, they're running a lot of 5 out. You know, like they're all ball handlers, they're all shooters, they're just running 5 out. And to an extent, part of that is true, but they're still a really good defensive team, and that doesn't happen in the NBA without a little bit of good coaching. Um, and sometimes keeping a core of guys together that are really talented but need to share the ball or do some of those things. Sometimes that can be difficult too. And the Celtics have faced their fair share of criticism in terms of, does each guy care about the other guy? The conference final stuff with Jason Tatum not being out there for like the um, conference finals MVP presentation and who's the best player and all those kinds of conversations that happen around the Celtics. They've made it through it all and they've stuck together and here they are. So I think, you got to give at least a little bit of credit to Joe Mazzulla at this point too. You might not want to, I can see by your face, but
But that's why I'm giving Brad Stevens more credit because he made it easy for Missoula. When you have stretch bigs, you have everybody that can shoot the three. There's not one person on that team that can't shoot the three ball. That kind of makes it easy to play offense and be able to be a high volume, high make 3-point shooting team.
yeah.
So I don't know. I'm giving more credit to Brad Stevens, no knock on Missoula. I think his coaching would show better on a different roster, different team. But you coach who you coach, and he signed up to coach a stacked team. So
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely. Well, good for them though. Either way, happy for the Celtics. And now I'm done being happy for the Celtics. Short lived. Uh, Hopefully next season, yeah, it will be different. But thanks again for watching and listening on this episode of Life in the Stands. Remember to go follow us on Twitter and interact with us there. That's where we're most active. Please like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we'll see you on the next episode.